Due to popular demand, let's go and install a CB antenna ball mount. But this ball mount here is not specifically for CBs, or it's not just for CBs. It could go to other radio bands as well, but we'll cover that later. And we're going to install this on this particular horse here that I've kind of attached a metal flash in here to simulate the car body, because I don't want to install this on my vehicle. So let's get to it. I would say a perfect vehicle to install a CB ball mount would be on a pickup. This SUV here we'll use an example of a reason why not to. There on the one side of the tire is a CB fire stick. It's 5 feet tall, and rule of thumb is you should have most of that antenna poking above the roof line here. The only place to really put that antenna will be right around this area, and I assume on the other side. Let's go to the other side. This won't be a good place because you got that gas system there, all the hoses and everything to interfere, and I'm not a big fan of putting a radiating device next to your gas source. Now on the opposite end here, you'll see that there is no gas systems there or anything like that, but what I'm trying to get at, most of this antenna should be poking above the roof line up here. The only place for me to put that ball joint will be in this location here. This is plastic bumper, so it will have to be somewhere up here for this particular vehicle. Pickup trucks will make better sort of vehicles because they don't have that problem. Their roof line is right here, so by the sheer nature of it, most of that antenna will be freewheeling. What you'll see a lot of these installations in not pickups, but SUVs and stuff, most of the antennas being blocked on one side by the body of the vehicle, which makes your radiation pattern very directional, and also it might be having some high reflective power going back into your radio to damage it. So so that's some of the pitfalls of doing an installation of this particular style onto like a vehicle with more real estate in the back like this. So here's your ball joint mount, and think of this as your shoulder joint, and that pretty much sums up the weird design of this. What you see here is two halves of a ball joint there, and within the ball you'll see a bunch of little teeth there, and a little track on the other half of the ball to sort of lock it in place. And this nut here pretty much locks it in place right here, and I'm using this big old hex screw to make adjustments. Other cheaper models have a flat tip, and then this portion right here is where you'll screw in your antenna, and this whole assembly totally unscrews. This is one big old bolt there. You can screw that in there, and then other devices to put on top of that, for instance pot belly spring, that will screw on top of here, and then on top of the pot belly spring you'll have another set of screws there where your antenna will fit in. Oh, wrong end. Just like so. So you see you have two sort of males, if you will. This is not going to work, so this assembly here could be taken off and then bypassing the spring to be placed in here, and so forth, and you'll be good to go. And I'll explain the reason why you would want a spring or not. With this articulating shoulder here, or ball here, it permits you to sort of ensure that your antenna is perfectly perpendicular to the ground, or straight up and down in relationship to your ground. Some vehicles are sloping in their body style, especially the modern vehicles. So your body, this hand right here, might be sloping inwards this way. So you're going to have to, before you do any cuts, is get that angle right. Actually, you would do the center cut to get this through the body, but you won't do these holes yet or drill these holes in yet. That would come after you get the proper angle on this. So to use this as a guide to be perfectly straight up and down, your body could be tilted this way. The body could be on a little slight slope, so your antenna will be somewhat kiltered inwards. So you're going to have to move the ball joint, rotating this way in conjunction with rotating this that way, to get your ball joint perfectly up and down. And that looks about to be perfectly perpendicular to the ground. You see that the body here is tilted this way a little bit, but your antenna is perfectly up and down. That is the main reason for this ball joint and its flexibility, if you will, or adjustability to accommodate many body styles. I've seen some installations where they had this like on a toolbox this way. So this plate right here is parallel to the ground, and as built, you see it's not going to work. This thing is sticking out that way. But with the articulation, let me loosen it up a little bit. At that point there, it goes totally straight up and down. So that's an extreme case of its adjustability. Just to point it out to you guys, because I don't think I've ever seen this on YouTube, a complete explanation of this particular style of mount. So the first step is to get this center piece right here through the body. I will not be worried about doing these outside securing holes just yet, because you don't know the angle. You have to kind of custom orientate the ball joint to the angle of your body as it fits flush with the body. So what I have here is a simple hole saw. I think this is 1.25 inches. Each ball mount from each manufacturer may require something different, so consult your installation manual. And now this has to fit directly into the middle, exactly in the middle of the ball joint there, just like so, because this part right here is actually plastic. It's an insulator. This part right here is conductive. This will be the actual middle portion of your antenna. This cannot have any contact with the body. If you do, all your power that you're transmitting or receiving is going to go straight into ground, and you're going to damage your CB or any other radio that you decide to use. Now usually with the whole set you get a template so you can make the proper holes. In my case, this was pulled from a vehicle, so it's out of service. Don't have a template, so I'm going to have to do some other way to kind of eyeball it in there in a way. So what I'll do is I'll place this perfectly in the middle as best I can, making sure I got equal distance from the center and to the side of the body here. And with a washable marker, I will use a washable marker, draw your boundary on the outside there, and I'll tell you in a second why that is important. So I know when I'm adjusting for the angle of my antenna there, using the template that I've just drawn on there, I know I'm going to have it perfectly centered on that particular hole there, so I won't run the risk of drifting to the side a little bit and having it too close to the edge here and shorting out my signal. I'm going to go ahead and twist the whole mount, and also at the same time twisting this particular adjustment here to get it perfectly perpendicular to the ground. And I'm eyeballing it now. In your case, you will probably want to put a leveler there to make sure you get it right. And that's my location there. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my drill points here. 1, 2, 3. Oh yeah, I did mention to keep an eye out on which location where the gas tank is. Also on the clear side where you're going to put this ball joint, make sure there's no obstruction on the other side, like cross beams or wire loom channels and stuff like that. You need to ensure to know what's on the other side before you do any cuts. You get the idea. So this side here goes within the body of the vehicle. You can see that there's a sort of like a black gasket here. This particular model is converted to accept PL239 connector on here, and I'll show you what that looks like a little bit later. But I would say 75% of the ball joint installation, you would have just a nut sticking out of here, and you secure your cable with a nuts and bolts. And this side here normally would be bare metal to go up against your body, the body of the vehicle, and the ground portion of your cable is then attached to this bolt right here and fastened down with a nut. So typically what I've seen out there in the field and what we've done before was use this Loctite copper coat. The model number is C5-A, made by Loctite. It's a copper-based anti-seize lubricant, but it would prevent rust and oxidation and stuff like that. And with the copper sort of mixture in there, it'll make a nice bond to the ground of your body, to the ground, to this. So many beneficial facts about that. It'll reduce static as well, and all that good stuff, because you do get a lot of interference the lower you get into frequency, and the CB frequency is what, 27, 26 megahertz. And this portion here is plastic. It's an insulator, like I said, and the threads on the holes here are threaded to accept these nuts here, so there's, or bolts rather, so you don't have a nut there to kind of worry about to lose or anything like that. It's all sort of built into this particular plate here. So let's stop talking and put this thing in there. So since you got your dimensions all figured out, you know you're not gonna short out against the body there. Alright, now that it's secured to the body, let's secure the ball joint in place. And it's just a matter of tightening this this screw down, and that tightens that particular, locks it in place. Now, majority of the mounts, when you run your antenna cable, you'll have one end that would be looking like this, and then the other end that goes inside your cab to hook up to your radio will look like this. And the vast majority of them, I would say almost all of them, will have this connector here, PL239. But on the other end, it can have one or the other. For the vast majority of them, like I said, they would have this type here, where right in the middle of this is the center conductor. That would be this big piece right here, usually attached to the clear, bigger insulated center there. And it'll just be clamped down just like that. And then you see your ground shield on the outside. and that will be braided on the outside of the inner conductor there. You want to take this part right here and fasten it down to another nut and bolt assembly here right in the middle of this. Secure it down and you're good to go. I would put some of that Loctite on there, or copper coat rather, or some other conductive material to sort of protect it and all that good stuff. And then your ground portion here would go to a smaller stud that's on the outside ring connected to the body. This is insulated from the body, like I've said like 2-3 times already. So it'll look something like that, just like that, and this end will be complete, and then the other end would hook up to your radio. Now this particular model here has a PL2 whatever, the female version of this. I can't think of it off the top of my head. And then all you have to do is just screw it in, just like so, and you're done for this particular configuration. So here there's 2 types of antennas that you could put in there, possibly more, but I know of 2 for sure, where this particular bolt could be unscrewed off, and this is called an ugly stick, or fire stick rather. Ugly stick is the fishing pole, but it's made out of fiberglass. It's continuously loaded, and all that means is a quarter wave CB antenna should be 102 inches long as far as length to be a quarter wave antenna. Pretty big piece of equipment there, with the continuous loading or coil that's being wrapped around this fiberglass pole here. It will electrically be the same as of 102 inch whip antenna, but physically it'll be smaller in size, physical size. So you just screw that sucker on there, and that's what it looks like right there. That's 5 feet of antenna right there for the CB band. And I've purposely built a mock sort of body here with really thin material is here, because just to show you what would happen if you decide to put this ball mount on a vehicle with really thin body material. That is exactly what's going to happen to your vehicle. Sooner or later, the stresses around this area would just start to rip, corrode, and all that good stuff, and any little branch that hits your antenna could just tear that portion out of there, just as a warning. And also, by using the horse here, you can see that the horse has a sloping angle going to a peak there, and by the positioning of the ball mount assembly on there will compensate for the slope. The antenna is pretty much up and down or perpendicular to the ground, as you can see there. Okay, I don't have access to this vehicle, but you can see they mounted this particular antenna kind of different. It's actually on the camper shell. So it's the same routine, and you can see that the camper shell is kind of sloping inwards a little bit, and they used a ball joint here to kind of adjust it to make this perfectly up and down. And that's your ugly stick for CB antenna on the law enforcement vehicle. Another antenna that you can put on there is just your basic whip antenna. And if you're using a stainless steel whip antenna, it has to be the full 102 inch long antenna to do the quarter wavelength of the CB band. And 102 inches will pretty much put it right in the middle of the CB band, channel 19. It's got 40 channels. 19 is the middle part of it. And I don't have the particular joint to screw this on here, but let's maybe pretend there's another assembly that kind of accepts this sort of location here, but I don't have it, but you could use your imagination. The only thing I don't like about this setup is it's really rigid, so whatever obstacle that you do hit and everything is going to do a lot of stresses on your body, and possibly the insulation of the mount itself. So classically what you'll see is a pot belly spring, this guy right here. Then you would need sort of an adapter sort of bolt there to screw into the hole here. Then just tighten down the spring and that'll take care of that. The only caveat about using a spring is, you see this length here? This is about maybe 4.5, 5 inches long. In your calculation of 102 inches of stainless steel whip using this, you actually added some length. By adding some length to that overall size, you have lowered the frequency of that particular whip. The tuning of that whip has been lowered, so instead of 27 megahertz that's CB ranges, it'll probably reduce down to like 25 megahertz or something like that, which will result in a bad mismatch to your radio and poor comms. And since the whip doesn't have this particular connector, the whip that I have, I'm going to use the fire stick here as an example to see what that looks like. So that's what that looks like. And the same thing with the fire stick fiberglass pole here, or antenna. You have to compensate for the tuning because of the extra length here. And how that is done with this particular antenna is, on the very tip, usually there's like a red little vinyl cap to this. It's adjustable. This is a locking screw there that keeps this adjustment locked in, and then you either raise or lower this particular adjustment up and down to compensate for that particular adjustment. Or if you want to tune in specifically to like a channel that you're on constantly, like let's say channel 2, you could peak in your performance to channel 2 instead of 19 for the whole band, whatever you decide. And once you're happy with the particular tuning, you lock it in with this nut right here, lock it in there, replace the cap, and you're ready to go. And you can see, if you want to store this antenna, if you have a carport or something like that, you could always tie it down to like the rest of your vehicle by just bending it over this way and just tying it off, just like the military vehicles does. And also, if you hit an obstacle, it'll give without much strain to the body. The spring itself would absorb all the shocks. And I've noticed also, when you're in rugged terrain, you know, just billy goating around the mountains or whatever, that will absorb a lot of the shock of your trek through the mountains. If you smack trees, go through puddles and stuff like that. Very flexible. And there's another antenna out in the market that I've seen recently that the whip itself is totally flexible. Then you will not need a spring itself. I forgot what that was called, but keep on the lookout for that if you're interested. I've used a ball mount in another vehicle that I used to drive to listen to the 42 megahertz range of frequencies. It was a pickup truck, and I didn't have enough real estate on top of the cab to put an antenna up there, so I use a ball mount instead. I mainly listen on those channels. I don't talk often, only to do a field test with dispatch. But it ran fine. It was perfectly fine, but it wasn't my ideal installation. But you had to do what you had to do. CB, it's a good radio to practice on if you want. Great introductory radio to do. They're cheap, inexpensive, easy to use if you just use the basic models without the upper sidebands and lower sidebands. It's a great introduction into HF because realistically you are using HF, high frequency, 27 megahertz, so you'll get to feel the pain of using these tall long antennas for that frequency band. I got a couple of buddies that do a lot of 4x4s out in the mountains, and they primarily use this to do that. And it's got the cool look effect as well that they're looking for, but it's okay for inter convoy communications, if you will, which they primarily do when they billy goat around the mountains. I think that's it for this particular segment. Gorilla Comm going 10-10.